everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. I'm Lara Trump, and I'm so excited to be joined tonight by the former commissioner of the New York Police Department, Bernie Kerik, and also New York City businessman and former congressional candidate, George Santos. Bernie and George, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
We're excited to have you here, and unfortunately, we want to start with a bit of really sad news. Really for the world, but for the conservative movement in general, the loss of one of the all-time greats, Rush Limbaugh. We found out yesterday that he passed. I just want to get maybe, some thoughts. I'll start with you, Bernie, in terms of a void that this leaves, because I feel like when people really wanted to get the facts, they wanted the cold, hard truth, they turned to Rush Limbaugh, and he's been a voice of reason for a long time. What do you think this means?
Well, he is a voice that changed not only this country, but changed the world in the way that people look at politics. He was somebody that told the truth,
right,
called it like it was, and that's going to be hard to find because you have people that's in the talk radio business. They're still very political. Mm-hmm. Rush was political when it comes to the party, but regardless, he told the truth. When it was bad news, he said it. He called it what it was, right. And that's hard to find these days.
It's really hard to find. We need more people out there doing that. George, obviously, I feel like we are of a younger generation. People have been listening to Rush Limbaugh.
Are you trying to say I'm old?
Not at all.
She's trying to say I'm old.
For years. No. but even, I think, for people of younger generations, he had listeners from all backgrounds, all ages. Do you think anyone would ever be able to replace him?
It's interesting because my younger sister, she's only 22. She listened to Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
So and she'd say, I get from him the hard, cold truth. I don't think there's a single journalist or radio talk personality out there doing it. I think we have some pretty big shoes to fill, and I don't see anybody being able to do that. Nobody comes to mind. I mean, I love Sean, but I hope he doesn't give me any crap for it. But
Sean Hannity is one of the greats as well. But, our condolences to the Limbaugh family. Certainly a loss for their family, but really a loss for America. And as you said,
for the world.
For the world. There will never be another one like Rush Limbaugh. When you can say just a first name and people know who
Rush,
you're talking
right.
about,
Yep.
that you've really made an impact, and that was the case there. We'll move on to the acquittal for the second time of President Donald Trump, another unconstitutional impeachment that the Democrats tried to push forward, wasting time, taxpayer money, all of the above. We're in the midst of a pandemic, a crisis, and yet this is what they focused on. Bernie, let me get your take, because I think for everyone, we knew the outcome. You had to have 2/3 of the Senate vote to impeach Donald Trump in order for him to have been impeached. We knew that was never going to happen. This was obviously a stunt by the Democrats, but I said it on our show last week, and I think it bears repeating. It felt to me like this whole thing was basically telling people the First Amendment is almost not applicable anymore, because if you think you have the right to, have freedom of speech, if you have the right to assemble, well, we're telling you, you only have that right if we deem it appropriate. And by we, I mean the left-leaning Democrats. It feels like they're trying to scare people into submission. Don't step out of line, or you see what we're doing to Donald Trump, it can happen to you. How did you feel about the entire impeachment nonsense round two?
You know what? And that's happening all over the country. The censorship, the attacks, the personal attacks. But when you look at the impeachment, you take a step back and you look at Rand Paul's speech
yes.
to members of the Senate 2 weeks in advance, a week or two in advance. They took a vote. They knew they never have the votes. It was unconstitutional.
Yep.
They agreed it was unconstitutional. They knew they'd never have the votes, but they went through the sham anyway. This was as political as it gets. It was another attack on the president. You had the Russian collusion, you had the Ukraine, you had the first impeachment, then you had this, and there's probably 2 or 3 things I've missed. But the bottom line is they wanted to impeach Donald Trump from the day before he was elected in 2016.
That's right. And George, I think that it is very clear to people that obviously the goal was to frighten Americans that supported Donald Trump, to make us feel like maybe we had done something wrong, maybe we were part of something that was inappropriate by voting for him, whatever their goal. But the president has said that he's probably going to run again in 2024. I know that part of their goal was to make him ineligible for that. It did not work. You saw the parade of people that were out to support Donald Trump on President's Day down in Florida. I want to make clear for people, we never put any of that on in terms of from our family or from any organized group of people that still remains as part of Donald Trump's core team of people. That was impromptu. That was done by people that love Donald Trump. I think the Democrats, George, think they've damaged him in some way. I only think it has intensified the love of a man that Americans knew fought for them, stood up for them, and represented them unlike any person really in modern history.
Well, Donald Trump is the most organic president in the history of our nation, right?
Yeah.
What one can beg to differ. Ronald Reagan was just as organic, but the president came from an outsider perspective, took the world by storm. You know, he took away the presidency for who was promised a presidency, which was Hillary Clinton, shocked the nation, shocked the world. And these people love him. Why? It took a billionaire to become the little man's people. The little man's president. And what's amazing to me for growing up as a kid who would walk by Trump Tower and look up and say, Mom, one day I want to have a building with my name on it, you know? and I went to business school because of Donald Trump.
Wow.
I ran for Congress because I thought Donald Trump, if he made it, it was the time for everybody to have an opportunity. The Democrats can't take that away. The impeachment did not hurt Trump. It made him stronger. It made MAGA stronger.
Yeah.
It proved that America First was always the Republicans and Trump Republicans' mission. And by pushing that sham impeachment in the Senate, after Rand Paul's vote clearly showed there was no chance to a conviction, was a waste of taxpayer dollar in the midst of a pandemic, as you said, showing the American people that the Democrats' priority will never be America first. Matter of fact, it's America last.
And I think that they really, I mean, we know they miss the mark all the time, the Democrats. But in particular with this, you know, when you have a boiling pot of water and you try and put a lid on it, it explodes. And they're trying to put a lid on a movement that started behind Donald Trump, you know, 5 years ago. They're trying desperately to tell all of us, well, that's over, it's done, you should move on. That's not going to happen. Donald Trump has been very clear, Bernie. He's going nowhere. He is the leader of the Republican Party still to this day. And I think a lot of the rhinos, quite frankly, that voted to convict Donald Trump in this impeachment, knowing full well how ridiculous it was, they're going to have a hard time going forward because new polling is showing that the majority, 63% of Republicans, actually at this point are favoring a third party. So to the Collins of the world, the Murkowskis of the world, the Burrs of the world, you better watch out. You know what? Well, we all knew how Romney was going to vote. He's had a vendetta against Donald Trump for a long time. But they ought to wake up, Bernie, the GOP side, because I think people need to understand that Donald Trump is still, again, the leader of this party. And if you're pushing against him as hard as some of these people are, I don't think it's going to work out very well for them.
You know, it's a shame. And I think, I personally, this is my personal opinion, I don't think we need a third party. I think Donald Trump needs to run the Republican Party.
That's right.
Because that's what people want. That's what they wanted for the last 4 years. That's why they wanted to see him in another 4 years after this. The bottom line is, I think his focus right now has to be the Republican Party and get rid of the rhinos. Mm-hmm. All those people in the Republican Party that's against America First, and that's what it's about. They're against America First, or they have such a hatred for Donald Trump that they're willing to go against the party even when it's against the law, even when it's unethical.
Yeah.
They don't care. You know, they jumped on this sham impeachment. The bottom line is, I think I think Donald Trump has to go after them, full force, primary them, get them out of there, and get people in that's going to support the America First project.
That's right. And I mean, you look at people like Mitch McConnell, and You know,
boy, here we go.
you look at the fact that during this election cycle, he was behind. He was like 2 points behind of the Democrat he was running against. And it took Donald Trump to actually get out there. And my father-in-law loves to tell this story because it's so true and it's very indicative of, I think, what you often see when it comes to Donald Trump, his popularity and the way that he influences people. He got behind Mitch McConnell. He did an ad or two for him, made some calls for him. And next thing you know, he wins by 20 points. I mean, that is the sway, George, of Donald Trump. And it is far from over. So I think any of these folks on the Republican side who think, well, we're just going to sweep Donald Trump under the rug and he's going to ride off into the sunset, I got to say, I don't think it's going to go down like that for him.
Anybody who thinks Donald Trump is going away has clearly been asleep the last 4 years.
True.
There's no sign of Donald Trump going away. Something I mention often, I was at the Ellipse on January 6th. That was the most amazing crowd.
It was.
And the president was at his full awesomeness that day. It was a front row spectacle for me. And despite everything everybody says, I think Donald Trump will not go away. Not only do I think that, I think he will be the next president of the United States. He will serve 4 years. And I think that he started something where we're going to keep in check all these politicians who have sat in Congress for decades doing absolutely nothing but waffling from one side to another of issues while they line their own special interest pockets and what so on and so forth. So I'm ready for 2024. I'm ready for 2022 to see the Trump effect of 2022.
I think it's going to be very interesting.
To build for 2024.
Yeah.
So there's no question in my mind that there's no Donald Trump going away.
Lara, if I can, the Mitch McConnell speech in the aftermath of the impeachment, I think was the most despicable, vile statement that he could have made. What he was trying to do was kill the president. That's what he was trying to do. And anybody that knows the president and is really focused on the last 4 years, as I watched this and listened to it, all I could think of was, this is political suicide.
Yeah, absolutely.
You may be one of the oldest relics in the U.S. Senate, but at the end of the day, you have just destroyed yourself and a part of the party and the following, your following. Because immediately after that happened, I was getting text messages from people in Kentucky that were like outraged
livid
at what this guy had done.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. Well, look, you got to let people, you got to sit back sometimes and let people do what they want to do, and believe them when they tell you who they are, because we've heard from Mitch McConnell, we know who he is for sure. Bernie, I want to ask you, I've talked about this a couple of times, but having you here, obviously as a security expert in so many ways, we see that there is still such a National Guard presence at the United States Capitol, in Washington, D.C., for the life of me, I can't figure out, A, why are they still there? B, how much taxpayer money are we actually going to waste on this? And isn't it completely antithetical to everything that the Democrats purport when they say walls don't work, yet they've got, walls up at the United States Capitol? What is going on with that? Is this just to make people think that Trump supporters are that crazy? What is this?
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, because the authorities in Washington, the people I talked to in the Capitol Police, the people I've talked to in the Washington, D.C. Police, and some of the feds, they don't know either. They can't tell me, they can't say why they're still there, what that contingent is there for. Nobody knows. There's threat assessments that are continually done. We haven't heard a word. Department of Homeland Security has come out and said there's no real threat that they're aware of. Okay, if that's the case, if that's really the case, then why are they there?
Yeah.
And if they're going to run that detail until August, I heard the other day until August.
I heard that too.
You're talking billions of dollars.
Right.
Billions of dollars. Wasted taxpayer money, billions of dollars for something that doesn't have to be, because you're trying to put on a show.
It's political theater.
An anti-Trump show. That's what that is.
Yeah. It's really kind of shocking to see. And look, I truly hope that they're taking good care of our incredible National Guard troops, these men and women who are away from home, away from their families, and at a time like this where, if you have kids, a lot of kids are still being homeschooled. You have now one parent probably at home dealing with that, while the other one is in D.C. in the freezing cold and the snow. We know how hot it gets in the summer. I hope they're taking good care of these folks. I think it's ridiculous that they're still there. But, thank you to the men and women of the National Guard for your time and spending it in D.C. I hope they don't hold them there that long.
Lara, here's one thing to think about real quick. There's several governors, state governors, that have called their guys back.
Is that right?
If there was a real threat, those governors would know, their intelligence people would know, and they really wouldn't have pulled them back.
Yeah.
And their recall would have been barred.
That's right.
There you go.
Because there is oversight at the end of the day, so those recalls wouldn't have been able to happen.
Well, let's see what happens with this. We'll certainly keep our eye on it, and we're hoping for the best here. Speaking of governors, we're going to move on to, you folks at home might know him as the Emmy Award winner, Andrew Cuomo, the pride of New York City. I'm just kidding, the pride of New York. No, he's really not. It's actually become really horrendous to see what we're uncovering every day, really, about the way that Andrew Cuomo, who won an Emmy, might I remind everyone again, for his handling of the COVID crisis here in New York State, it's coming out that it was really so much worse. One of his aides, since the last show we did, has come out and admitted that they hid nursing home data, and the deaths via, his charge to send people back into nursing homes in the very beginning was really twice as bad as we originally thought. Then he came out and he did this press conference the other day, which I couldn't really stomach to watch the whole thing, but what I saw was him basically saying, well, it's politics, this is a political vendetta against me. Wait, might I remind him that the Attorney General of New York State is a Democrat, Letitia James, on the same team? How is that, Bernie, a political vendetta against him? I don't know what's going on with this guy, but I feel like he kind of keeps digging his hole a little bit deeper.
Don't forget a progressive Attorney General, too, at that.
That's right.
A very
progressive
yes.
Attorney General at that. The bottom line is, it was his assistant that told a number of Democrats on a Zoom call that they concealed the information, they hid the information, and this is what's most important, because they were worried about the Department of Justice. They were worried about the inquiries by the Justice Department. That's obstruction.
Right.
Shouldn't have happened. And I think, I have to believe somebody's going to investigate this at the federal level, because based on her testimony, based on what she has said, based on the real numbers, it's obvious they concealed this evidence that there were far more deaths than anybody knew about, and he can get up there and hold all the press conferences he wants, but at the end of the day, they lied to the American people, they lied to justice, and the Attorney General found it.
Yeah, and George, you're right. Letitia James is an Attorney General who hates Donald Trump so much that she ran on how she was going to take down Donald Trump. If there's ever been a politically motivated person for the Democrats, it is Letitia James. So to see her come out with this information on Andrew Cuomo, I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you. But then you have Congress voting, the Democrats in Congress voting not to hold accountable any of these governors for the COVID deaths, right? So I don't understand. Either we have to hold people accountable for what they have done, or we don't. They want to say that they're going to hold Donald Trump accountable and do the sham impeachment, but Andrew Cuomo gets a free pass?
Accountability only matters when you're a Republican, apparently.
Apparently.
Right? Because Andrew Cuomo should have been stepped down or removed forcibly from office in handcuffs. 15,000 elders were killed in nursing homes. These are our most vulnerable. When people talk about vulnerable population, it's our children, but at most vulnerable, it's our elder, because we can have oversight over our children. It's just so sad to see that the Democrats have gone to such a low extreme, where now they're just blatantly covering up Cuomo's suicidal killer policies during COVID, where he got awarded for leadership and for all those grand things he never actually accomplished. Why doesn't the Emmy board retract the award?
Well, you know they would do it if Donald Trump had gotten it, right? But
they wanted to retract his star.
You know, George has a really good point, and it's sort of it's becoming the virtues of the Democratic Party. In this case, they ignore what's happened with Andrew Cuomo. Mm-hmm. They ignored what he's done. You know, in the incitement that they tried to charge the president with, they've ignored all of the members of Congress that really incited major riots all of last year.
That's right.
They've ignored the conduct and behavior of the man now sitting in the White House. Hunter Biden, his brother Jim, him involved with China, involved with the Ukraine. Are you kidding me? Anybody else, there would have been a 30, 40 count indictment. Mm-hmm. This guy's sitting in the White House. They've turned into a party that's ignoring ethical and criminal violations that are beyond the scope of your imagination. And it's continual. But they'll go after President Trump, try to charge him with incitement, knowing every single one of them knew there was no incitement.
Yeah.
They knew it.
Absolutely. Well,
it's what I usually say, just to make a point to what Bernie said, Lara. I'm a business guy. I've done private equity for 11 years in New York. Eric, Don Jr., they've all done pretty much the same, longer. Yeah. Even for guys like us who have been doing this for a long time, for us to close a hundreds of millions of dollars deal, it takes a couple of months. It takes a due diligence effort. It goes way over my head. I have to fight back. Hunter was handed millions of dollars in China, Ukraine, Russia, with no experience whatsoever in anything, essentially, aside from his recreational stuff that we all saw. I just want to understand, where's the accountability there? I'm sick and tired of this. I'm held accountable to a picture if I take at a party. But Cuomo gets away with this. Hunter, Joe himself, his brother. I mean, when does it end?
Yeah.
We don't have Trump to protect us anymore at this point.
Well, we don't, but it's all the more reason I think that people are lining up behind Donald Trump, want him to run again for a second term in office, because I've said this before, but it's about more than just Donald Trump. It's about more than just the Democrats. This is about a system in Washington, D.C. that is rotten to the core, and these folks in D.C. have known for a long time that Donald Trump is not beholden to them. He owes them nothing. They will hold nothing over his head.
He's beholden to no one.
Can't hold anything over his head, essentially.
And he has exposed them in such a way, has exposed the media in such a way, they are terrified of a second term in office for Donald Trump, because it really would change the game. And these folks that have been profiting off the backs of the American people for decades, I mean, some of them are lifelong folks that have been part of the swamp, the game would be over for them. The jig would be up, and they're desperate to keep Donald Trump out. But I think the more time passes and the more hypocrisy people see with things like this. Could you imagine if it had been someone in our family, Bernie? Could you imagine if it had been my husband or my brother-in-law who took $10 from China, from Ukraine, from the mayor of Moscow's wife? We would have a totally different scenario on our hands. But I think people are just sitting back and waiting. They're terrified of cancel culture, which we're going to get to in our next segment. But people are going to come out in full force and support Donald Trump if he runs again in 2024, which, stay tuned, I think he may. But it's really outrageous. You're right. People are sick and tired of it. They're fed up, and they're just waiting in the wings until they get the right time. They're going to get back out and they're going to vote him back into office. So with that, we're going to take a quick break. Stay right with us. We'll be right back with more of The Right View. Welcome back to The Right View. Well, there's a situation that has been going on now for around 11 months, which is that our children in America have been out of school. If you are lucky enough to have your child in like a Catholic school or maybe a private school that has reopened, or you live in a place where your governor has been smart enough to say we can safely reopen schools, then congratulations to you. But for a lot of America, that is not the case. Joe Biden campaigned on the idea that he would be able to get kids back in school, and yet we see them sort of backtracking, George. We see that Kamala Harris was on the Today Show the other day, couldn't say whether or not it was acceptable for teachers to go back to school without the COVID vaccine. Again, Savannah Guthrie was doing the interview, so she probably let her off easily. But, it is frustrating, I think, whenever you see things like a Biden administration prioritizing things like illegal immigrants and making sure that 11 million of them are going to get amnesty in America, and making sure that we stop construction of the border wall. And whenever you see that they are shutting down the Keystone Pipeline, but we can't get focused on getting our kids back in school, I quite frankly can't think of anything more important than that.
Well, remember, promises kept, promises made, promises kept was Donald Trump's slogan. It's clearly not Joe Biden, because every promise he's made, he's broken. He said he wasn't going to terminate the Keystone Pipeline. He did that. He said he wasn't going to lay off tens of thousands of people. He did that. He said he was going to open schools. Now it's maybe once a week to start. I mean, once a week is a joke. What's the future of our children? People say K through 12. I'm more concerned of even 9 through 12.
Yeah.
That's when your social skills are developed through school's everything for you at that point.
Yeah.
It was for me. And he's taking this away from these children. The science is there. The CDC has come out time and time again saying that the science supports schools going back in session. That's why the Catholic schools are doing it. The private schools are doing it. And for those who are fortunate to do that, great. Well, here's the problem. Joe Biden is infatuated with the control he has over America right now. And there's nothing we can do to take this intoxicating power grab and control that he is getting a whiff of. And look, I'll put it simply put is kids need to be put back in school. My district has 2 of the top schools in America. One ranked at number 1 in America for all public schools, K through 12, and one ranked at number 3. Those schools are in total, utter chaos. I talk to parents from those schools on a daily basis, and their only thing is, we need our kids back in school.
Yeah, when you see the mental health toll that it has taken on children across America, I have a 1 and 3-year-old, and I can tell you, just seeing how the kids naturally learn from other kids, they want to play with other kids, just seeing how awkward this whole situation has been. You want kids back in school, but then you have the folks out in San Francisco wanting to spend millions of dollars to change the names on the exterior of schools. I mean, think about that. Not only do you have to take the names off of the schools, you've got to, rebrand everything, the school uniforms, this and that. I mean, we're talking about that being the priority over our kids who are lacking in their social development, who are falling behind academically. This is the next generation of America. And if you want to talk about a crisis, if I were China, I would be laughing at us right now, because we're going to have a generation of kids coming up in America that really has lacked the education, has lacked skills based on being out of school already for a year. And Bernie, who knows when they're going back? Nobody.
Nobody knows. Nobody can tell you.
Yeah.
That what's most frightening about this is there is no plan.
That's right.
There is no plan. When Donald Trump said he was going to do something, he did it. These guys, they said they're going to do it. They're not going to do it, number one, and there's no plan to get it done. There's no real plan. So, and the science is on our side. Mm-hmm. Even Dr. Fauci, who, depending on which day of the week it is, even him, he has said that the kids should be back in school.
That's right.
So if you're going to listen to him for anything, any one thing he said, that's the thing you should be listening to.
Yeah.
Get the kids back in school. And as you said, Kamala Harris, I watched the interview. She was bumbling and stumbling, couldn't get it out. There's no plan. And that's frightening. That's scary.
There's no plan because they don't know what to do.
Well, and you know what? You look at the fact that COVID affects people of a certain age group and people with pre-existing conditions more than others. The average age of teachers in America is somewhere around like 42 or 43. But you have all of these other folks that have been essential workers who've been out there, who are much older than that, who are still out there working, still have to go to their jobs. I'd say teachers are essential. I'd say having our children in school is essential. I mean, gosh, we could go back to the fact, like we were talking about almost a year ago, that there are kids whose only nutritional meal a day comes from the lunches that they get at school. That it is teachers who notice whenever there's a developmental issue with kids, more so than their parents. That it's teachers who recognize when there's abuse in the home and can report that. Think about all these kids that haven't been seen for a year. It's outrageous. It's terrifying. And honestly, you're right. We want to follow the science here, and the science says get the kids back in school.
Not only the science, but if you look at all the reports coming out of child abuse is up,
Yeah.
child suicide is up.
Absolutely.
I mean, they lied about grandma and killed grandma. Now they're lying about our children to try to kill our children.
Pretty much.
We're essentially raising a next generation of high-functioning illiterates at this point, because the literacy level in this country has dropped another 10 points, something we could have not afforded already because we weren't the most educated nation. We're already behind compared to China, India, and all these other third world countries when it came to education. So to see this happen, it's a slap in the face of good Americans who pay their taxes so their kids could be in school.
That's
so
right.
it's I said this on Twitter. It wasn't very popular, but hey, since we're not sending kids back to school, cancel the school tax. Why pay the teachers?
By the way, that is the one thing. If you live in a district and the kids haven't gone back to school, it's a lot of money that you pay.
40% of your property
it's crazy.
taxes.
Shouldn't we all get that back if the schools aren't open?
Why are
I
the teachers
completely
entitled to a
agree,
salary?
because I have two daughters in college, and they're home, and we're still paying some outrageous amount of
tuition,
money.
totally.
I'm like, really?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's all crazy. Well, speaking of science and speaking of Dr. Fauci, Bernie, as you just led us into, in case you haven't heard, Dr. Fauci has won an award of $1 million from a university in Tel Aviv for, wait for it, defending science. Okay. There's a lot that I have to say about this, but Bernie, let me start with you. Should Dr. Fauci even be able to accept $1 million?
Okay. I am glad you brought this up, because I will tell you, Dr. Fauci works for the United States government.
That's
In fact, as we talked about off air, he's actually had that job longer than he's been alive. Okay. That being said, he's an employee of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Okay? An employee of the U.S. government, if you get a gift in excess of $25, you have to document it. You've got to file a disclosure. You've got to get approval. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
$1 million?
Yeah.
I want to know how that works.
I'd like to know,
I want to
too.
know how it got approved. I want to know, does he really get to accept $1 million award? And then there's the for what, okay?
Well.
I won't get into the for what, but at the end of the day, ethically, I don't even know how they do that.
It's really, it's so crazy. But George, you know, when you talk about somebody defending science, I mean, my goodness, for all the things that Dr. Fauci is, he hasn't been right a lot of the time. Let's not forget that from January
Let's
to
say
March.
most of the time. Let's say most of the time.
I'm trying to be generous, but for the part of last year, the beginning of COVID, don't forget, he was the one that was saying, don't panic, America. Masks don't work. If you buy a mask, if it makes you feel better, you wear the mask. That whole thing. And then all of a sudden now he's talking about we got to have double. One mask is bad. Two masks is better than one. Three is better than two. This is the guy that got an award for defending science, really?
He doesn't need your generosity. He just got $1 million.
That's true, I guess.
So, you know what bothers me more about the $1 million and his science defense award is that he got the science all wrong. He didn't get it only wrong on COVID. He got it wrong in the epidemic of HIV in the 80s when he was first appointed to this seat. Let's go backwards, right?
But he's still there somehow.
He's been getting it wrong since he was appointed. Did he make strides? Sure. I mean, 36 years in the same position. God, politics is the only place you can fail up, and he's a great example of that, right? But to see him accept this award really bothers me. I went through new member orientation in D.C., in the Capitol, and it's important to note, congressmen and women, senators, reps are not allowed to receive gifts.
Yeah.
It's unethical. You can literally be expelled from Congress for receiving a gift. How is it that this man doesn't have to adhere to the same ethics? What makes him deserve $1 million for doing his job that he's very well paid to do?
Well, I think is he not one of the highest paid government officials in America?
He makes more than the president of the United States.
Well, if that president was Donald Trump made $1.
Zero. Oh, $1.
Anybody
Sorry.
made more than him.
That's right. Don't forget, Donald Trump donated his salary every quarter to different causes. We'll see what Joe Biden does in this first quarter.
He needs the money, Lara.
Well, it does bring us, I think, to our next section. We sort of alluded to it and talked about it a little bit before our break, but you know, you see that throughout the election process, we were talking about during the campaign, how beholden Joe Biden is and the Biden family to China. We know about Hunter Biden taking the money. We know that he has said since that he was going to withdraw from all of these, I guess, things that he's a part of overseas. Yet Hunter Biden still owns 10% of Chinese private equity firm, private equity firm 24 days into Joe Biden's term as president of the United States. I know, Bernie, that the media is not going to hold him accountable for this. We know that they're just going to let this slide. I think it should make Americans really uncomfortable that the son of the president of the United States is still part of a situation over in China that could jeopardize Hunter, that could certainly influence his father if they wanted to. This is a little crazy that he's still part of this.
I think there's two issues. The first and foremost, I don't think he can get any more compromised than he already is.
Maybe that's true.
Right? So that's one thing. But I think it also tells you a lot about Joe Biden. It tells you a lot about Joe Biden. If this was your father-in-law, if this was President Trump, and he had this issue within his family, he would tell Eric, listen, until I leave office, you got to jump off that board.
That's right.
Until, or Don Jr. or Ivanka, whatever. He would make sure that there was no conflict of interest to the point that it would create a possible compromise. He would ensure that. It says a lot about Joe Biden that he hasn't forced the issue, that he hasn't told Hunter. Now, keep in mind, there's probably a reason for that, and that is, according to the emails, which I've seen, Joe Biden got 50% of some of the stuff that Hunter Biden brought in. So in that case, maybe he doesn't want him off the board.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think it's something to really think about.
Yeah, I think that, again, it's so hypocritical, all of this. You contrast the Biden family with the Trump family, and what I can tell you is that the moment that Donald Trump was elected, our family made a conscious decision never to enter into another overseas deal until Donald Trump was out of office. We went so far as to pay the United States Treasury any money that was paid to a Trump property by a foreign entity so that there was no question of impropriety, so that there was no question that there was any sort of influence, undue influence going on. We went above and beyond what was required of us, and we
still got hammered.
And we naively thought that would be sufficient, that they would say, gosh, look what they're doing. Isn't that nice that they did all of these things, even though they didn't have to? Doesn't it prove that we were trying to do things the right way? It's a bit of a slap in the face, George, I think, to see this and to know it's still going on, and to see the total media bliss and obsession with the Biden family when we know, had the shoe been on the other foot, and if that was the Trump family, they would be obliterating us at every turn possible.
Your family lost hundreds of millions in deals.
Yes, we
for
did.
Donald Trump to be president.
Yeah.
He loved this country so much, he put his family's livelihood on the line. And nobody understands that. Trump Organizations, it's a global organization. I've had the privilege of doing business with you guys in the past. I was shocked when he actually came down the escalators in this building.
Yeah.
I said, wow. he really just shut down the door to business if he gets elected. And he got elected. I was at the Hilton that evening on election night. It was probably the funnest day of my life because I kept the reference
You
was
were there too, weren't you?
I was there.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a great party. The reference was
I was
the
there.
Javits Jacob Center is demolishing because that glass ceiling is coming apart on them. But
Yes.
to this point here, it bothers me is that Scaramucci is still mad that his China deal for Skybridge fell through because of Trump barring China and all the sanctions. Can you imagine how much more mad Scaramucci must be because Biden's kid gets to sit on that
Right.
board in China?
It worked out for him.
Like, how did that work out for you with all your nonsense, Scaramucci?
Yeah,
It's
well,
crazy.
you're exactly right. I don't know that Donald Trump or anyone in our family will actually ever get credit for it.
No.
But, you know, we really did try to do the right thing at every turn. We tried to, you know, do, again, above and beyond what was required. And
We
so,
the people know. That's what matters.
I think you're right. I really do think you're right. When you see the love that still exists out there for Donald Trump, when, you know, anytime I fly anywhere, I still have flight attendants, pilots, people on the airplane like slipping me the beverage napkins. We love your family. It's amazing. Thank you to everyone out there that has ever done that. It's so nice. And it feels great because the media would have you believe that, you know, nobody likes us, that we're horrible people, as they try to do. But really, it's a little scary to see that this is still going on. It'll be interesting to see what happens with China. We know under Donald Trump that trade deals were negotiated that I don't think anyone else, Bernie, could have done other than Donald Trump. We know that President Xi of China is probably not scared of Joe Biden. He was probably a little scared of Donald Trump because Donald Trump was going to hold his feet to the fire. And when he drew a line in the sand, you better not cross it because there were going to be consequences. It's much different than I think how this administration, the Biden administration, will be with China. And, you know, we've seen how important a player on the world stage China has become in the midst of this pandemic. The only economy to grow in 2020, the economy of China around the world. You know, what's happening again in our schools? What does that mean long term for our relationship there? I don't know, but what I can tell you is that people better be paying very close attention to the China situation as it relates to Joe Biden and his family, because I can tell you that nothing good is going to come out of this. It's a very frightening thing.
The fact that, if you don't mind me jumping
Yeah.
in, but the fact that China gets a slap at the wrist for setting the whole world on fire, and then they report that, oh no, COVID's not really an issue here. Wuhan's seen only 3,200 deaths. And are you kidding? So you're telling me that the epicenter of your virus only saw 3,200 people, while the United States is bearing almost 400 and somewhat odd numbers of loss?
God, it almost feels
It's
like
like,
it was planned in
seriously?
some way.
The,
If I were
well, isn't that the
conspiracy
hashtag,
theorist.
the plandemic that they say?
It's very interesting.
It's very odd.
But I want everybody to stay tuned. Don't go anywhere because we're going to talk an entire segment about cancel culture coming up. You don't want to miss it. So we'll see you back here right after this. Welcome back to our final segment of The Right View. Bernie, I'm going to jump in here with you. We talked about over the summer, whenever there were calls to defund the Minneapolis Police Department, you said then they are going to refund it. You can't have a city without having law enforcement. And here we are. Looks like defunding the police didn't go over so well with the residents of Minneapolis because now there are calls to refund the police department. They're spending a lot of money on recruiting people into that department now when they wanted to get rid of it less than a year ago. Give me your thoughts.
So here's the reality. Nobody wants to live, visit, work, or go to school in a place where they're not safe, right? And people, you know, as soon as there's crime in a community, they say, well, we need better schools. We need jobs. We need, better real estate. The bottom line is, it's not happening. You're never going to have it if you don't have a safe and secure environment. So what do you do in Minneapolis where they already had problems and they were already understaffed in their police department? You defund the police and you lose through retirement or attrition. You lose the best of the best cops.
That's
right? They drop out, they leave, they're not wanted, they go to another department. So Minneapolis, what happens? Shootings go through the roof, murders go through the roof, robberies go through the roof, violent crime is extremely high, and the citizens, not the advocates, not the city council members that made this decision. Keep in mind, back then, many of the city council members, most, they made this decision. Now, it's unanimous that they refund the police to get at least 200 officers back into the department. And what are you getting? You're getting new officers that have to be recruited, vetted, trained, and then work in some kind of OJ capacity, on-the-job training capacity, until they're up to speed. So you're still null and void of real enforcement, real cops. And this was all done when it didn't have to be. And as we talked about then, I said this was the stupidest thing that these communities can do, whether it's Minneapolis, Atlanta, New York City, which defunded by $1 billion.
Right.
We spent the last 30 years taking cops and trying to make them better, giving them better equipment, better training, verbal judo skills, you name it, everything and anything we could to make sure they didn't revert to deadly force, to make sure they were interacting with the community. And what do? Now we defund them and we take it all away. You think that's making the communities better? It's just pure stupidity.
Yeah, it is. And George, I do want to get your take on this, but this is exactly the problem with cancel culture. Because that's what this was. It was, the police department is to blame for so many issues that we have in the city of Minneapolis, around the country, New York, as Bernie's just saying, let's cancel them, let's defund the police. At the time, I think we all knew what a dumb idea. How do you have a community without law enforcement? And now these people are doing what we all anticipated, running back saying, wait a minute, maybe we made a mistake. You think?
Well, look, you know what? And to add to Bernie here, we actually even went the length of requesting college education so that they can go into the police force, just to request better, and I'm not saying non-college educated people are not smart, but more intellectuals into the force so that they can make a better judgment call, right? So, look, we all thought it was a bad idea. We knew it was a bad idea. One officer that did one bad thing in Minneapolis triggered this all across the country. Now the NYPD, and Bernie, you were ahead of this of the force. It was most peaceful police in the United States. The largest force, the most peaceful. New York City went from the pre-Giuliani era to the post-Giuliani and Bloomberg era as being a model city. And then we get this guy. I refuse to say his name. But, and here we are. Now we have 121 filed city council members. They're primarying each other through the wazoo because there's a lot of open seats. And they're primarying their own conservative Democrats here in New York. And they're all pledging to defund the police here in New York by another $250 million and to remove police safety officers from our schools. Is this the Democrat Party that represents Democrats, or is this a socialist party that's, hiding in Democratic skin? I quite can't figure it out yet. But look, if we keep listening to the AOCs of the world and keep defunding the police, I mean, this is a great example. I think this should be the trend. Look at all the crime rates all across the country in all the cities. This should be the trend to refund the police. I really hope that New York also refunds that $1 billion and a surplus on top of it to the NYPD.
And I just have to say, it's been very sad, I think, for me to see, and for so many people, to see police categorized as these awful people over the past, 8 months in America. Law enforcement officers go out every day not knowing whether they're going to come home. And Bernie, you know this better than anyone. They leave their families to go out and do a job to protect our communities, to protect all of us, to make sure that we are afforded our constitutional rights, that they remain intact, to keep America together. And I've been really saddened to see how awful police officers, by and large, have been treated across America since this past summer. It's disgusting to see. And I agree with you, George. I hope this trend continues. I hope people finally realize that whenever you go down this dumb rabbit hole, like the Democrats try and get us to go down all the time, these things that, they're so woke about everything. This is the dumbest woke trend I've ever seen. They don't work out. It's not going to make anybody better. It's not going to do anything positive for anyone. It's just so frustrating, but I think it's part of a bigger thing that's going on, the cancel culture, again, to bring it up. In case people haven't heard, this was one that I read the other day, and I am not a Bachelor watcher. I don't know, Bernie, if you are, George, if you are.
No.
Do I look like a bachelor?
I don't want to assume anything. You may be. But I have never really watched The Bachelor, but I do know that Chris Hansen is the guy that, or Harrison, I'm sorry, Chris Hansen was another one. Chris Harrison is the host of the show. Now, apparently, one of the former women on the show posed in 2018 in an antebellum dress, right? So these are representative of the South in the Civil War era. And in 2018, no one had a problem with this. This is what Chris Harrison said. And now in 2021, people said that it was a racist thing for her to do. And all he did, and maybe he didn't say it perfectly, was say something along the lines of, let's give her a chance to explain herself. Well, there are calls all over to cancel Chris Harrison. They want him off of the show that he has hosted, I think, since the beginning. But I think my question really becomes...
Wait a minute. Give her a chance to explain what?
That she posed in a dress that people are claiming was a racist thing to do. So, okay, just to catch everyone up on that. So that's where we are. They're calling for him to resign. Former cast members are coming out saying he should resign. All the Bachelor fans coming out saying he should resign. But where does this end, I think, is the frustrating part for me, because you continue to hear about things like this, about the Star Wars TV show getting rid of a woman named Gina Carano, who was, one of the characters on the show. She has been known to post, wait for it, conservative-minded tweets. And she said something, she made a historical reference to Nazis, and all of a sudden, she's canceled off of a show. Yet, let me list for you some of the liberals in America who have referred to Nazis. Beto O'Rourke, also known as Robert Francis O'Rourke, Jane Fonda, Trevor Noah, AOC, Robert De Niro, Bill Maher, John Legend. I'm sure the list goes on and on. So by simply using the word Nazi, you get canceled. I guess, Bernie, again, I just want to know, when is enough enough? When will these people be satisfied? Canceling everybody, having people lose their jobs. I guess the goal is to frighten people into submission?
Here's the frightening thing, and I go back to the history of New York City in doing this. When people change, when everything starts to implode. Think about back, you may not remember, before Giuliani took over in 1994, basically New York City was imploding.
Yeah.
It was at its worst. It had the highest violent crime, had the highest murder rate. We had over 2,200 homicides in 1993.
Wow.
It was physically imploding. The worst crime-ridden large city in the world. Finally, people said enough is enough. We have to do something about it, and they hired a Republican to come in and do it. I think this whole cancel culture thing, it's the same thing. When it starts to have an impact on everybody, when it impacts those people that are out there canceling culture now, when it has an impact on them, and it will.
Yeah,
it will. Eventually it will, because it grows so big that it has an impact on everybody. Then everybody takes a step back and says, oh, that's not right. You can't do that. It's never right for them. Just like here, back in those days, it was the city council. It was everybody. No police, no police, no police, until everybody was getting killed in the streets. And they said, oh, wait a minute. Get the cops in here. Add more cops. Do whatever you got to do, but get it done. Same thing here.
Yeah, and George, I think I feel this the most coming from sort of our younger generation. They're influenced, I think, a lot by Hollywood, by social media, by all this, I guess these newer things in our world. And it's very frightening to me to see how quickly these things happen. But how everyone wants to be, again, so woke. Everyone has to prove themselves and say, well, I stood up against this, this, and this. But again, I'll go back to my kids. I look at my children and I think, my gosh, if this is what is happening right now, what will happen? Will my kids even make it to be of an age when they can, have their own thoughts? Or will they just be forced to think the same way, that to think what, the leftists out there, what the Democrats are deeming is acceptable? Because if you step out of those lines, you are immediately canceled. They will take your job away. They will, you've felt the impact yourself. They will do crazy things to your home, they'll try and blacklist you, whatever it is. It's really scary.
This cancel culture has to stop. In the most simplest way put, people are dissecting a picture from 2018. They're dissecting references from the Civil War. I mean, that's in our past. That's not how we live today. We've come a long way from there. As you mentioned, cancel culture has affected all of us at this point. It affected my own personal life. I go to a party for New Year's, take a picture with a few friends, enjoying ourselves, and the party happens to be at Mar-a-Lago. Great party. I love it.
Great party.
Phenomenal party. And so I come home and my house is trashed. $42,000 worth of damage.
Oh my gosh.
Windows shattered. I mean, just absolute chaos. My carport pulled from the ground. I mean, real damage. Graffiti, slurs of all sorts that I can't even say on air because they're that inappropriate. And they get away with it. The cops came in and says, look, we can pull the security camera from all your neighbors and all, but I mean, we're going to identify them. What are we going to do? I said, prosecute them.
Yeah.
It's going to go nowhere. When it hits a judge, I did the report. I want the investigation to go on. My fiance is fired because we're at a party. Now, it's funny that, and this sounds almost very petty, but I was watching that inauguration, or as I call it, a hostile takeover of our country with 30,000 troops.
Sort of looked that way.
Lady Gaga came from inside the Capitol building, maskless, holding on to one of the Marines, sang the national anthem, turned around and said hi to everybody, maskless, took a seat, maskless, and about 15 minutes later she got a mask. Was her house trashed? I'm wondering, I'm asking for a friend, because I took a picture out of a mask. I wasn't around the leaders of the country maskless.
Yeah.
That's very disturbing to me. I mean, it has to end. Or else we're going to end the society.
Lara, I'm gonna tell you something. Here's where we're going. In 2003, I was appointed by President Bush to take over the Ministry of Interior for Iraq, and I had these Iraqis that worked under Saddam Hussein, and we were in the police academy one day, and they were talking about freedom and what President Bush had done for the government of Iraq. And one of the guys was sitting in the class, and he was bawling, crying. He had they had light blue uniform shirts on, and his shirt was all, water dripped. And I said to one of the instructors, I said, what is it? What is the problem? And he said, he can't believe that he can now sit in his home and he can talk about anything he wants, and he doesn't have to worry about the government coming in the morning or through the middle of the night and snatching him out of the house.
Wow.
And him disappearing. That's where we're going. That's what I feel. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Where we're at
that.
today. It's that mentality. You're God scared to say anything because your neighbors are going to trash your house, because the government's going to come after you, because you're going to get crucified in social media. This is a frightening time, and I think the people of this country better take a step back, look at history, and you need to realize where this is going and put an end to it.
Well, it's exactly right, I think, what you're saying. Look, we, throughout the campaign, this election cycle, we're very clear that we are headed down a path towards socialism if Joe Biden gets elected, that we're headed towards a path of communism, quite frankly. And that's what you're talking about. That is That is so scary that it could happen in the United States of America, but I think you're right. I think this is the beginnings of it. And whenever everybody is told you have to conform your thinking, you have to conform everything you do to this way, otherwise you don't have a place here, that's communist mentality. It's plain and simple.
Well, communist mentality, another thing, Lara, is has Joe Biden caught up in days in office as to his executive orders, or is he still behind in days in office?
He's still behind, far
Okay,
behind,
that's
about
what I
half.
thought.
Yeah.
So that's communism.
Well, and the guy
Yeah.
who himself in October told us that anyone that ruled by executive order was a dictator is now doing exactly what he said, would have been a
Rules
problem.
for thee, not for me.
Exactly, but that's how it works. But I think, look, I just want to tell people out there, I know that it's really frustrating, this cancel culture, but we have to stand up to it. We have to take a stand, and don't be afraid. If you have something to say it. Post it on social media. Do not be afraid to voice your opinion. This is our First Amendment right as American citizens to do this. They want you to be scared. They don't want any of us to have
That's why
free
they're doing
thought
this.
anymore.
That's
Exactly. Right. It is to scare Americans, to scare you into submission, and we're not going to do it. We are not going to take this laying down. This is the greatest country in the history of the world. No one said it would be easy to remain the greatest country, but we have to do it. We have to fight for it. And yes, I use the word fight, although I know the Democrats would say that I'm going to incite something. You got to fight for it because, it's worth it. This country is so great. I want it to be the best country in the world for my children and generations beyond, but we're slipping down a scary path, and we cannot allow it to happen. In this country, we're not going to do it.
Before we go, I'll give you one tip. Whenever you want to use the word fight, just say you're Lara Waters Cortez, and you get away with it. Hyphenate your name and make it Waters Cortez. It's all
And
good.
then I'm fine.
Nobody bothers
No
you.
problem. There will be no issue. Well, I really want to say thank you to George and Bernie, my guests today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being patriots, for fighting for America, for standing up for what you believe in and not being afraid to do so. I know you both do it all the time, and it's very refreshing. Yet, sadly, we don't see it as often as we should out there, and we want to continue to see that. So thank you both for being with us today. And thank you to you at home for joining us. We'll see you right back here next week for more of The Right View.